They say mothers forget nothing. But sometimes, it's not what we forget. It's what we silently carry for years, waiting for someone to remember without being reminded. I wasn't looking for applause, not even a thank you. But what happens when the very people you gave everything to forget you exist until they need something? My name is Lorraine Whitmore. I'm 65 years old, a widow, and a retired librarian from a small town where people still wave when they pass your front porch. I've lived in the same white-paneled house for over 30 years. The rose bushes out front? I planted them with my bare hands the summer my son turned 7. Brandon, my only child, my world. He was a quiet, serious boy growing up, loved puzzles, hated the spotlight. After my husband Walter passed from cancer 9 years ago, Brandon became the only constant left in my life, or so I thought. When his marriage fell apart and his ex-wife left, I didn't hesitate. His daughter Chloe was only 3 at the time. She needed stability, he needed help. So I moved in. Not forever, I told myself, just until things settled. That just until turned into 6 years. I cooked every meal. I taught Chloe to tie her shoes, to read, to say please and thank you. I sat on the floor with her through tea parties, tantrums, and chicken pox. Brandon worked long hours in tech, sometimes night shifts, and he'd often come home to find his daughter already asleep on my lap, clutching my sweater like it was the last safe place on earth. I didn't keep score. That's not what mothers do. When I finally moved back to my own home, I still picked Chloe up from school twice a week. Sunday dinners were non-negotiable. Brandon would bring her over. I'd make pot roast or lemon chicken. We'd play board games after dessert. It was our rhythm, ours. As the years passed, Chloe grew into a bright young woman. Sharp-minded, articulate, determined. She got straight A's, led her school's environmental club, and won scholarships that made me cry behind closed doors. She was going places, and part of me felt like I helped build those wings. But what nobody knew, what I never talked about, was the college fund. See, Brandon was always strapped for cash. Tech work wasn't stable, and child support never came on time. Chloe had dreams of going to a top university, but the numbers never quite added up. So I did what I thought any loving grandmother would do. I liquidated Walter's old coin collection, one he'd spent decades building. I cashed out a small annuity we were saving for post-retirement travel. Italy, France, places we'd talked about but never reached. I dipped into my own emergency savings, quietly, without telling a soul. I opened a private account in my name, not to make a point, but to protect the money, and began building Chloe's tuition fund. Over 5 years, I managed to save $45,000, and I never asked for a single thank you, because love, in my mind, was not transactional. It was acts of service. Silent, constant, unseen. Sometimes when I saw photos of Chloe on social media, smiling at her dorm, laughing on some beach during spring break, I'd smile too, even when I wasn't tagged. Even when she didn't call, she was living her life, and I was content knowing I helped make it possible. But here's the thing no one warns you about. When you give so much of yourself for so long without being seen, one day, invisibility stops feeling peaceful. It starts feeling like erasure. They remembered my cooking, my Christmas gifts, my birthday cards with the neatly folded cash inside. But me? I became a fixture, background. Useful, but no longer meaningful. I told myself not to mind. I repeated the same lines so many of us whisper when the loneliness creeps in. At least they're okay. That's all that matters. But the truth was, I wasn't okay. Not really, because somewhere in that stretch of years where I mothered and grandmothered without pause, I forgot how to be just Lorraine. There was no applause, no acknowledgement, and I didn't expect any. But I did hope, quietly, that when they spoke of their lives, maybe they'd say, we couldn't have done it without her. They never did. It's funny how easily people forget who held them together. Sometimes I think about what would happen if I disappeared. Would Brandon notice? Would Chloe wonder where I'd gone? Would they realize the Wi-Fi still worked because I'd called the provider last week and fixed the bill again? That the scholarship committee only gave her that award because I helped her polish the essay? Probably not. But then again, that's the nature of a revenge story like mine. It doesn't start with fury. It starts with loyalty. Blind, boundless loyalty that, when shattered, doesn't scream. It walks away. And before you even realize what's missing, the warmth is gone. The one person who made everything feel like home is no longer holding the door open. It didn't happen all at once. That's the most dangerous thing about being pushed aside. You rarely feel the shove. It comes in quiet nudges, like the slow pull of a tide you didn't notice was rising until your feet are no longer touching the sand. The first time I really felt it was on a Thursday. I'd baked banana bread, still warm, still wrapped in the same foil Chloe used to love peeling back as a little girl. She'd sent a text that morning saying she was coming home for the weekend, and I thought, why not stop by just to say hi? It used to be normal, me dropping in, expected even. I'd help fold laundry, cook dinner, catch up over tea. But that Thursday, something shifted. I knocked on the door and waited. Laughter behind the walls, movement, then silence. When the door finally opened, Chloe stood there, 19 now, in a cropped hoodie, phone in hand. Her face flickered for half a second. Was that surprise? Maybe even happiness? But it faded fast into neutral. "Oh, hey," she said, half glancing at me, half listening to whoever was on the other end of her call. Then she cupped the phone and said into it, "My grandma just showed up with banana bread, so retro, right?" She laughed. The person on the other end laughed. "I know," she added, still smirking, stepping aside so I could come in. Retro, like I was a VHS tape she didn't throw out only because it looked cool on a shelf. I smiled. I always smiled. "I thought you might like a taste of home," I said, offering her the bread. "Thanks," she said quickly, eyes already back on the screen. She placed it on the counter like it was a napkin from takeout. No hug, no warmth. Erica wasn't home. "She's out with someone," Chloe said, not looking up. "Some yoga guy, third date, I think. He's good with his hands or whatever." She laughed again. I didn't. I sat down, tried to ask about her classes. She answered in one-word sentences. "Psych." "It's fine." "Not really." The conversation thinned out like a dollar store napkin. Then came a moment I didn't know would stick to my ribs. I complimented her outfit. "That color looks lovely on you, Chloe. Brings out your eyes." She looked up just long enough to say, "You'd be surprised how many guys on campus think so too. Guess I got the good genes, huh?" It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even meant to be unkind, but it was cutting in its casualness, like I was some faded photo she had outgrown. When I stood to leave, she didn't walk me to the door. She didn't ask when she'd see me next. She waved, eyes still on her phone. On the drive home, I kept telling myself I was overreacting. College kids are all like this. They're distracted, busy. She didn't mean anything by it. But the problem wasn't that Chloe had changed. It was that I hadn't noticed until now just how far I'd already been moved to the edge of her life. I sat in the parking lot of my own home that night, staring at the porch I used to decorate with her. Paper pumpkins, fairy lights, even chalk art. And I asked myself a question I wasn't ready to answer yet. Do they still see me? Or just what I bring? It's funny how loneliness can exist even when your house is full of memories. Maybe that's the cruelest kind, being surrounded by the echoes of what once was, but knowing no one's listening anymore. And maybe some of you watching this, you felt that too. The quiet shift, the laugh that lingers just a little too long when it's at your expense, the text that never gets a reply. Have you ever realized too late that your love had started to feel like background noise to the people you raised? If so, you're not alone. Let me know below, because sometimes just being seen by one other person changes everything. After that visit, I hesitated more before calling. I used to send little check-ins. "Thinking of you, eh? Saw something at the market that reminded me of you." But her replies became shorter. Eventually, she stopped replying at all. Erica, too. One morning, I texted her, "Need me to bring anything for the potluck next week?" 2 hours later, "Already handled, don't stress." No greeting, no "thanks, Mom," just dismissal. I tried not to let it hurt, but then one morning in October, I posted a photo of myself from the fall fair, just me, holding a caramel apple, orange leaves falling like confetti around my shoulders. My smile was small but real. I watched Erica and Chloe like posts from celebrities, influencers, even their dentist's dog wearing a pirate costume. But not mine. Not even a like. Not a single comment. That's when I knew. They hadn't just grown up. They had grown away. Thanksgiving came. Erica insisted on hosting this year. "You shouldn't work so hard," she said. But I knew what that meant. You're no longer the center of this family. Still, I showed up, with my famous sweet potato casserole, the one Chloe used to sneak bites of before dinner. I wore my best emerald cardigan. Walter used to say it made my eyes sparkle. When I walked in, no one looked up. Erica was in the kitchen with her new boyfriend, loud, boastful, always cutting me off mid-sentence. Chloe was setting the table, phone in hand, scrolling between placing forks. She didn't even greet me. And during dinner? They complimented Chase's dry turkey and store-bought chutney. No one mentioned my casserole. When I offered to say grace, Erica waved me off. "Let's just eat before it gets cold." I nodded. I sat quietly. I watched Chloe make jokes about how old people don't get TikTok, and everyone laughed. I smiled too. I'm good at that. But inside, I felt myself start to shrink. A little more, and a little more. Later, I washed the dishes alone. No one offered to help. When I dropped a plate and it shattered, Erica didn't look up. "Just leave it, Mom. It's not a big deal." But it was. It really was. You don't always hear the moment your place in the family disappears. Sometimes it's a soundless shift, like being edited out of a photograph that still hangs on the wall. That Thanksgiving was hard. Not because anyone yelled, not because of some dramatic explosion, but because I realized for the first time that I was no longer invited to belong. After the casserole incident, the one no one noticed, I drove home in silence. No music, no thoughts, just the hum of my old car and the ache in my chest. I sat in the driveway longer than usual, just staring at the porch light I'd left on for myself. A strange thing to do, leaving a light on when no one else is coming. But maybe I still hoped someone would call, ask if I got home safe. No one did. The next morning, I woke up to a group text in the family chat. Erica had sent a blurry picture of her cranberry chutney with the caption, "New family favorite. Thanks for a beautiful dinner, everyone," Chloe replied with a gif of someone dancing in a turkey costume. Brandon gave a thumbs up. No mention of me, no thanks, no glad you were there, Mom. And suddenly, I wasn't just hurt. I was invisible. I started noticing it everywhere. I used to be the person they called when the heat wasn't working, when Chloe needed rides to debate club, when Erica forgot how to roast a chicken. But those calls stopped. One weekend in December, I drove by their house on my way back from the library. I slowed down. There were cars in the driveway, lights on inside. They were having a party. Chloe had posted photos of it later that night. Twinkling lights, cocoa mugs, cookies on a tray I recognized because I gave it to her. No invitation, no mention. You want to believe it's just a mistake, that maybe your text didn't go through. Maybe they meant to call but forgot. Maybe they're busy. But after enough maybes, the truth becomes louder than your excuses. I stopped checking the group chat. I stopped trying to force myself into conversations where I felt like a guest. But the hardest part wasn't the silence. It was realizing how easily they adjusted to it. They didn't ask where I was. They didn't wonder why I hadn't come by. They just kept going, like I had never really been there to begin with. One night I stood in the guest room, the one Chloe used to sleep in. The bed was still made, her old nightlight still plugged into the wall. I'd even kept her stuffed rabbit in the closet just in case she ever wanted it back. And I thought, what happens to all the pieces of ourselves we saved for the people who no longer want them? I used to imagine her kids one day staying in that room, used to think I'd teach them to bake banana bread the way I taught her. Now, I wasn't even sure if I'd be invited to the graduation ceremony I helped pay for. The Sunday after that, I made a roast, just out of habit. Potatoes, carrots, my mother's old recipe. Set the table for 3 even though I knew no one was coming. Old habits don't die. They just get quieter. And then came the worst of it. Chloe posted a grandma appreciation picture on social media, her with her other grandmother, the one who lives in Arizona, who she sees maybe once a year. Grateful for the strong women who came before me, I stared at it for a long time. There was a time I would have printed it, framed it, and put it on the bookshelf next to her graduation photo. Now I just closed the app. When did I become background? I was there for her first lost tooth, her first crush, The night she didn't get into that private school and cried in my lap. And now I was a ghost who dropped off banana bread and vanished before she had to say thank you. I think what hurt most was Brandon's silence. He saw it happening. He saw how Chloe was pulling away. He saw the moments I was being erased, and he let them pass like weather. When I mentioned the missed invitation, he shrugged. She's a teenager, Mom. Don't take it personally. That's the thing people don't get. It's never about one moment. It's about all of them, layered, accumulated, until the weight breaks something that once felt unshakable. And it did break. Quietly. Cleanly. Like a plate you don't even realize cracked until you pour something hot into it and watch the line split. There's this saying, we teach people how to treat us, but what no one says is that sometimes we also teach them how to forget us by always being available, by never saying no, by covering every gap and asking nothing in return, and then one day they forget you were ever holding the foundation together. They assume the house stands on its own. That December, I skipped decorating. No garlands, no candles, no handwritten cards. I left the wreath in the box and the stockings in the drawer. I think I was waiting for someone to notice that something was missing. No one did. Christmas Eve has always been mine. For over 3 decades, I've hosted it in the same home. The same lights, same garland wrapped around the banister, the same sugar cookies shaped like snowflakes and candy canes made from the same recipe my mother passed down. Even the tablecloth was the same one Walter and I picked out in a holiday sale back in 1994. It still had a tiny burn mark from the year I knocked over a candle. Chloe used to trace it with her finger when she was little, whispering, "That's our family mark." This year I started cooking at 5 in the morning. The ham was already basting in the oven by 6. By 8, the potatoes were mashed, and I had Chloe's favorite vegetarian stuffing cooling in a blue casserole dish I only used for her. I folded linen napkins into poinsettia shapes and placed one at each setting. At Chloe's seat, I tucked a small bracelet underneath, sterling silver, delicate, with a tiny C charm. I'd found it in a boutique 2 months earlier. No special occasion. I just thought of her when I saw it. That used to mean something. They arrived late. No call, no apology. Chloe walked in first, didn't even look up from her phone. She mumbled, "Hey," dropped her coat on the armchair like it was a coat rack, and walked straight into the dining room. Brandon followed. He was on a Bluetooth call, giving half nods as I greeted him. "Hey, Ma, smells good," he muttered, still distracted. Erica wasn't with them. Apparently, she was doing Christmas with friends this year. No one explained. I didn't ask. I brought out the appetizers. Cheese board, rosemary crackers, baked brie. Chloe grazed, still scrolling. Brandon poured himself a glass of wine, then another, and turned on the TV for background noise, loud background noise. When I asked Chloe how finals went, she shrugged. "Fine." I said, "You've always had your grandfather's mind for numbers." She replied, without looking up, "I think it's more about work ethic than genetics." Brandon laughed. "Ma, you're still writing checks, right? Maybe Chloe can teach you how to set up online banking this year." Chloe giggled. I smiled, the kind of smile that tastes like pennies on your tongue. Dinner began like every other year. The table set with my good china, candles lit, ham carved. They passed dishes like they were passing time. We'd barely said grace when Chloe looked up from her phone and said, loud enough to cut through everything, "Old people shouldn't take up space." The words landed light like a joke, but they echoed like a slap. She laughed, not maliciously, just casually, the way you laugh at a meme or a bumper sticker. Brandon chuckled. "You're not wrong," he said, reaching for more potatoes. Neither of them looked at me. I stood there, pie server still in my hand, and in that moment, I realized something that had been whispering to me for a long time. They didn't see me anymore. Not as a person, not as family, not as someone whose love paved the way for the very life they live now. I didn't scold her. I didn't say a word. I walked into the kitchen, placed the server on the counter, and stared out the window into the darkness of the backyard. Outside, snow had begun to fall. The lights on the fence flickered softly, casting long shadows, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my reflection in the glass. A woman in a pressed red sweater, silver hair curled just right, lips trembling slightly beneath her practiced smile. The kind of woman people call strong only because they've never seen her break. I waited for someone to come in to say, "Grandma, I didn't mean it like that," to whisper, "Mom, that wasn't okay." No one came. No footsteps. No apology. No voice calling my name. Just the clinking of forks against plates. Just the sound of my own breath, steady but shallow. I turned off the oven, wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked calmly back into the dining room. They barely looked up. "Excuse me," I said gently. "I forgot something in the car." Brandon nodded. Chloe kept scrolling. I picked up my purse, my coat, and stepped outside into the cold. The wind bit at my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. In my coat pocket was the envelope I had meant to give Chloe after dessert, her spring tuition check, enough to cover everything. I pulled it out, held it for a moment, then tore it straight down the middle. Right there on the sidewalk, under the soft glow of the Christmas lights and the silent hush of falling snow, I shredded it into ribbons. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I got into my car, drove home. Didn't cry, didn't rage. I just sat in the quiet of my living room, still wearing the sweater I'd ironed that morning. The house still smelled of cinnamon and cloves. The pies were untouched on the counter. The charm bracelet still under the napkin at Chloe's place. The stockings still full, the gifts still wrapped, each one with a hand-lettered name. I didn't open them. I didn't move them. I left it all exactly as it was, a museum of a holiday I no longer belonged to. At 11:48 p.m., my phone buzzed. One message in the family group chat. "Erica, thanks for dinner, Mom. Everything was amazing. Chloe, dancing elf gif." That was it. Not a single person noticed I had left. The next morning, everything looked exactly the same. The garland still hung over the fireplace. The lights still blinked softly in the window. The pies still sat on the counter, untouched, their crusts beginning to shrink at the edges. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it all. It was like walking through a holiday diorama, beautiful, preserved, but lifeless. And for the first time in all the years I'd spent giving Christmas everything I had, there was nothing left inside me to give. I made tea, the good kind, with cinnamon and orange peel, poured it into my favorite mug, the one with the tiny chip on the handle that Walter used to call well-loved. I sat at the table alone, the gift tags still scattered next to me, each one written in my neatest cursive. To Chloe, love Grandma. To Brandon, with care. They were still wrapped, still there, just like me. Not a single call came that day. Not a single text asking if I was okay, if I'd gotten home safe, if I meant to leave early. No one even noticed I was gone. It wasn't the kind of heartbreak that crashes down like a thunderstorm. It was the quiet kind, the kind that settles into your bones and makes your house feel too big. I spent most of Christmas Day walking from room to room, cleaning up what no one had touched. The casserole dish Chloe used to fight over, the little ceramic Santa she painted in 3rd grade. It had sat on the mantel every year since. The place cards I made out of recycled Christmas cards, because she once told me, it's the little details that matter. They didn't matter anymore. Not to her, not to him. Maybe they never did. I used to think love was about consistency, that if you kept showing up, kept giving, kept loving, eventually people would recognize the value of that. But this wasn't about value. It was about expectation. I had become expected. My help, my food, my time, my money, none of it felt like a gift anymore. It felt like background noise. And now, with me gone, they just turn up the volume somewhere else. By December 26th, I still hadn't heard from anyone. At noon, I walked into the guest room, still made up for Chloe. There were clean sheets, her favorite quilt, the lavender sachet I tucked into the pillowcase. The candle on the nightstand had burned down halfway. I'd lit it hours before they were due to arrive, hoping she'd feel the warmth. She hadn't even looked in the room. I sat down on the edge of the bed and picked up the framed photo on the dresser. Chloe, age 8, gap-toothed and beaming, holding a spelling bee trophy we stayed up 3 nights studying for. I printed it, I framed it. I was the one who wiped her tears when she missed the finals the year before. Now she barely gave me eye contact. What do you do with all the parts of yourself that were wrapped around someone else's life? I didn't know. So I sat there, quiet, breathing, existing. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt hollow. I tried distracting myself, opened Facebook. My feed was filled with other families, grandmothers in matching pajamas with their grandkids, holiday tables full of laughter and red wine. Erica had posted a photo too, Brandon and Chloe clinking glasses over dinner. Caption, "Grateful for this beautiful, low-key holiday." Low-key, that's one way to describe it. Low-key because I wasn't there. Low-key because they didn't have to perform gratitude for the woman who held the family together. On December 27th, I returned 3 packages I had shipped in for Chloe: noise-canceling headphones, a designer tote, and the pink yoga mat she mentioned in passing. I stood in line at the post office behind a young father with a toddler. He kept kissing her forehead, adjusting her hat, talking to her gently even when she cried. And something in me cracked. Not because I wanted to be that toddler, but because I realized how long it had been since someone handled me with care. Back home, I gathered everything I'd planned to give them and placed it in a large tote: the charm bracelet, the tuition check I never gave, the envelope of framed photos I had printed from Chloe's childhood. I didn't throw them away. I just set them in the back closet, out of sight, out of reach. And the strangest thing, the house got quieter, but so did the ache. Because when no one comes looking for you, you stop waiting to be found. I stopped texting good mornings. I stopped checking the group chat. I turned off the porch light by 5. I didn't hate them. I just stopped showing up for people who never noticed when I was gone. And maybe some of you reading this, maybe you've reached that point too, where the silence doesn't hurt because it's new. It hurts because it's familiar. If you've ever sat in a room you built with love and realized no one even sees you there anymore, you're not the only one. That week, I started to forget things. Not big things, little things, like the way Chloe used to giggle when she played in the snow, like the sound Brandon's voice made when he said, "Thanks, Mom," back in the days when he still said it. It scared me at first, but then it felt like something else, relief, because maybe forgetting is the first step to remembering yourself. New Year's Day came and went like it always does. Quiet, cold. Another page on the calendar flipped over, but the weight in the room stayed the same. I hadn't taken down the tree. It still stood in the corner of the living room, lights dimmed, ornaments drooping like they were tired too. I wasn't decorating anymore, but I wasn't ready to undo it all either. Everything looked frozen in place. So was I. That morning, I decided to dust. Not because I wanted to, just because I needed to move. I wiped down shelves, rearranged books that hadn't been touched in months, fluffed the couch cushions. When I got to the top shelf of the old hutch near the fireplace, I noticed something stuck between 2 old photo albums, an envelope, yellowed with age, edges curled, and handwriting I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Walter's. My knees gave slightly. I sat down on the couch, heart doing that strange, uneven rhythm it always did when grief snuck up from behind. It was addressed simply, "For Rainy, when you need to remember." He used to call me that, Rainy. Said my voice reminded him of spring rain. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a folded letter dated December 26th, 1998. The year Chloe was born, the last Christmas we spent with his mother. His words were crooked in places. He always held the pen too tight, but strong. My Rainy. If you're reading this, I imagine you're feeling lost. You always give so much. You hold this family together in ways no one even sees. The meals, the traditions, the quiet steadiness. And someday, I fear, they may forget. Not because they're cruel, but because they're busy, growing, trying to matter in a world that measures worth too loudly. But don't you ever forget this. You are the roots. And even when roots are buried deep and unseen, they hold everything up. You are the reason our daughter made it through her darkest year. You are the reason this house feels like home. You are never just grandma or mom. You are the beginning. Love you forever, Walter. I pressed the letter to my chest and let the tears fall. But they weren't the kind I'd cried on that cold Christmas Eve. These were warmer. Less like drowning, more like rain finally softening hard ground. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir. Not hope. Not yet. But something softer. A nudge. A shift in the floor beneath me. I got up, walked to the mirror in the hallway, the big one I used to use to check my earrings before family dinners. I stared. The woman looking back at me had silver strands in her hair, soft creases around her mouth, tiredness in her shoulders, but she also had eyes that had seen things, done things, built things no one ever thanked her for. She looked smaller than she used to, but there was something steady still burning beneath her skin. For so long, I had been shrinking myself to fit inside the spaces they gave me, quieting my presence to keep the peace, giving more, asking less. But Walter saw me. Even now, years after he was gone, he saw me. And maybe that was the reminder I needed most. That night, I made myself a real dinner. Not toast, not cereal. I roasted vegetables, seared salmon in a pan the way Walter liked it, set the table for one, lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, not because anyone was watching, because I was. And maybe that sounds silly, but when was the last time you made something beautiful just for yourself? When was the last time you sat at your own table, not out of habit, but out of respect? Because I think some of us, we forget we're allowed to do that, to care for ourselves the way we once cared for everyone else. And if you've ever caught your reflection and not recognized the woman staring back, you're not the only one. Let me know in the comments if you've ever felt that too. Not sad, just faded. Like the best parts of you were written into someone else's story and then edited out. Later that evening, I pulled out an old box from the closet. Inside were journals I'd kept when Chloe was little, scraps of paper with grocery lists, bedtime routines, birthday plans, even the handwritten budget I'd used when I opened her college fund. I looked at it all, and for the first time, I didn't feel used. I felt powerful. Because I had been the one holding it all together, and they didn't even know. But I knew. And now, I wasn't angry anymore, just done waiting for someone to notice. I folded Walter's letter and placed it in the drawer next to my bed. I turned off the lamp, and for the first night in a long time, I fell asleep not as someone's mother or grandmother or fallback plan, but simply as Lorraine, a woman, a builder, a root, still here, still strong. The day after I found Walter's letter, I woke up before the sun, not because I had to, because I wanted to. I didn't reach for my phone, I didn't check the family group chat, I didn't scroll through photos I wasn't in. I just opened the curtains and watched the light creep across the frost-covered lawn like it had somewhere to be. It felt like something inside me had shifted. Not a grand, dramatic revelation, just a subtle loosening. Like a knot I didn't realize had been tight for years had quietly unraveled overnight. I wrapped my scarf tight, pulled on my coat, and stepped into the cold. The garden was sleeping, the rose bushes brittle, the lavender dry, but I stood there anyway. There's something sacred about standing in a space you've nurtured, even if it's not blooming, even if it looks dead, because roots don't stop existing just because the leaves fall off. And neither do women like me. I used to think healing had to look like energy, like yoga, or hiking, or smiling, more than you cry. But now I realize, sometimes healing is just standing still long enough to hear yourself breathe again. So I stood. Let the cold nip at my cheeks. Let the wind whisper things I hadn't dared to say out loud. And then I went back inside, made a second cup of coffee, and opened a fresh page in my journal. At the top, I wrote, "Who am I without them?" Not with bitterness, with curiosity. I started writing. I am a woman who once drove cross-country in a station wagon with a toddler and a cooler full of homemade sandwiches, just to help my son start over. I am a woman who sewed Chloe's unicorn Halloween costume from scratch, with sequins, even though I hate sewing. I'm a woman who learned to sleep alone after 40 years of being part of a we. I am a woman who can bake without recipes, comfort without words, love without being seen. When I finished the list, I didn't cry. I just sat there, pen still in my hand, amazed at how much of myself had been buried under years of being just mom or just grandma. Later that afternoon, I packed up the rest of the Christmas gifts. Every one of them. The charm bracelet, the expensive headphones Chloe had wanted, the candle set Brandon once mentioned in passing. I placed them all into a large canvas bag, not with spite, with clarity. Then I drove to the store, waited in the return line behind two college kids arguing about matching pajamas, and quietly returned each one. From there, I went to the bank. I asked to speak to the branch manager, sat across from her at a desk too big for that room. "I'd like to close a private college fund account," I said. She looked up, surprised. In your granddaughter's name? No, I replied. In mine. She paused. Would you like to notify the intended recipient? I smiled. No, I said. I think she'll figure it out. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove across town to the small community foundation office I used to donate to years ago. Before Chloe's tuition had taken over every extra dollar, I walked inside, sat across from the new director, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes. I'd like to transfer this into a scholarship fund, I said, placing the cashier's check on the table. She blinked. That's very generous. Would you like it to be anonymous? No, I said. I wanted the name to matter. I'd like it named after my late husband, Walter Whitmore. She nodded, scribbled something down, then asked, Is there anyone you'd like to honor through the first recipient? I didn't even have to think. I want the first scholarship to go to a first-generation student, I said. Someone whose parents didn't go to college, someone who works hard, someone who's trying to bloom in a world that forgets to water quiet roots. I walked out into the afternoon light with a thank you letter in my hand and a warmth in my chest that didn't come from anyone else's approval. It came from mine. That evening, I roasted a butternut squash and lit a candle, not for the holiday, just because I wanted to. I set the table for one, again. And this time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt right. I've come to believe that there are two kinds of strength. There's the kind people cheer for, the loud, visible kind that shows up in awards and social media posts and applause. And then there's the other kind, the kind that keeps cooking meals no one thanks you for. That keeps showing up when no one notices. That builds futures in silence and then walks away when respect is no longer in the room. That kind of strength is the reason families survive. That kind of strength deserves to be remembered. And if no one else does it, I will. I sat by the fireplace with a glass of red wine and watched the light flicker across the room. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Because now, I wasn't waiting for them to remember who I was. I had remembered for myself. It started with a coffee mug, not the one with the chip that reminded me of Walter. A new one, pale blue with tiny wildflowers around the rim. I saw it in the window of a local shop downtown, and for once, I didn't think, that would be perfect for Chloe. I thought, that's for me. I bought it without hesitation, and that night I made a cup of peppermint tea and sat at the kitchen table with it cupped in both hands like it was something sacred. Because it was. It was mine. From there, it became small rituals. I started going to the library on Tuesdays again, just like I used to before retirement. Not to check on Erica, not to see if Chloe needed help with her college apps, just to read. To sit in the quiet corner near the mystery novels, sip coffee from my blue mug, and not belong to anyone for a little while. One afternoon, I saw a girl there, maybe 19. She was wearing a fraying hoodie and taking furious notes from a borrowed biology textbook. I recognized that kind of focus, the kind born from having no backup plan. She reminded me, of who I'd once been before marriage, before motherhood, before being Grandma Lorraine. I slipped a sticky note into her bag when she stepped away to take a call. Keep going. You're closer than you think, from someone who believes in you. She never looked back, but I did. I signed up for a ceramics class the following week. It had been 32 years since I touched clay. The last time was a night class Walter and I took as a date night after Brandon was born. He made lopsided ashtrays, I made mugs. We kept every one of them. This time I made a bowl. It came out crooked, but it held soup, and it made me laugh. I stopped checking the family group chat altogether. Not out of anger, just no longer interested. Brandon sent a photo of Chloe with her new internship badge. Erica shared a casserole recipe she just discovered, even though I'd made that same one every Thanksgiving since 2009. I didn't comment, didn't react. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I no longer needed to be the one clapping from the wings when the show never included me. One afternoon, the scholarship director emailed me. They'd chosen the first recipient of the Walter Whitmore Quiet Roots Award, a girl named Maribel, daughter of a housekeeper, first in her family to attend college, studying early childhood education because she wanted to teach kids the way I wish I had been taught. I cried, not because of grief, because of gratitude. Something I built in silence would bloom through someone else. That felt like resurrection. I framed the email and placed it on my nightstand, right next to Walter's old photo and his last letter. Every night I looked at it before I turned off the light, and every morning I reminded myself, there are better places to plant love than the people who don't water it. By mid-February, I had begun going on short walks again, not out of duty, out of curiosity. I'd forgotten how quiet the streets could be at 8 a.m., when most people are still tucked in or rushing out, and the world belongs to the birds and the early sun. I passed a neighbor one morning. Sandy, 2 doors down. She was hauling groceries into her house, struggling with a frozen turkey. I helped her without asking, not because I wanted anything in return, just because helping still lived in me, no matter how others had used it. That night, she brought over a pie. Apple, still warm. I didn't know you liked apple, she said. I didn't either, but I do now. And here's the truth no one tells you about rebuilding. It doesn't start with a hammer. It starts with permission. To sit in your own quiet, to buy a mug because it makes you smile, to pour into strangers because it feels better than pouring into voids. I didn't cut anyone off. I just stopped being the only one reaching. And in that space, where guilt used to live, something gentler grew. Not revenge, not pride. Peace. They still haven't noticed. Brandon hasn't asked why Chloe's spring tuition never arrived. Chloe hasn't called since Christmas Eve. Erica sent a birthday card, 4 weeks late, unsigned. But I'm not angry, because they weren't the audience I needed applause from anymore. The applause came in softer forms, the smell of cinnamon scones I baked for myself and no one else, the way the new blanket I crocheted fit perfectly over my shoulders while I read, the neighbor's dog who now waits by my gate every afternoon, tail wagging like I'm his favorite stop. Tiny things, but together they felt like a life returning. So if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever built something for people who stopped showing up, know this, you are still the root, and roots can regrow, quietly, even when no one claps. It started with a voicemail. I had just finished repotting my basil plants when the phone buzzed. Unknown number, Georgia area code. I almost ignored it, but something in me said, just listen. Hi, this is Nicole Reyes, editor at the Millfield Community Post. We're doing a feature on local women who've made a difference in education. We came across the Walter Whitmore Quiet Roots Scholarship, and your name kept coming up. Would you be open to an interview? I stared at the phone for a full minute, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Me? The woman who got left off the family Christmas card? We scheduled the interview for the following Tuesday. I spent the next few days deep cleaning my kitchen, not because I expected visitors, but because it helped settle my nerves. I reread Walter's letter 3 times, picked out my favorite scarf. And when the reporter arrived, I made cinnamon tea and served it in my blue wildflower mug. Some things I do now are just for me. Nicole was young, mid-30s maybe, but respectful. She listened, really listened, as I told her about the fund, about Walter, about what it meant to plant something for someone who may never know your name. Then she asked gently, was the scholarship started in response to someone in your family? I paused. I could have told her the whole story, how Chloe mocked me at dinner, how Brandon barely looked up from his plate, how I walked out into the snow without a coat, carrying dignity like a fragile heirloom. But I didn't. I smiled. No, I said. It started because someone once saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Now I'm just passing it forward. She nodded and wrote every word. The article was published online 2 days later. By noon, it had been shared nearly 2,000 times. The headline read, Quiet Roots, How One Widow Turned Heartbreak into Hope for Struggling Students. I didn't expect it to blow up, but by Friday, someone had left a bouquet on my porch. No card, just a tag that read, Thank you for seeing people like me. And that's when I knew this was bigger than me. On Sunday, the local news station called. They wanted to do a segment for their Women Who Lead series. I politely declined the live interview, but agreed to send in a short clip from home. I set up my phone, sat in my living room, and spoke like I was speaking to a friend. Sometimes the deepest contributions come from people who never raise their voice. You don't need to be loud to change lives. You just need to keep showing up. And if you've ever felt invisible, please know, you're not. Not to the ones who matter. The clip aired the next week. I didn't tell anyone. Not Brandon, not Erica, not Chloe. But they found out. Erica called first. I didn't answer. Then Brandon. Then Chloe. All voicemails. Mom saw the piece. I didn't know about the fund. Grandma, I didn't realize how much you were doing. Why didn't you tell us? And I didn't respond. Not out of anger, out of peace. Because for once, I wasn't someone waiting to be seen. I was someone who had already chosen herself. That night, I sat out on the porch, wrapped in the new quilt I made. The stars were clear, the wind was soft, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. And maybe this is the part you've been waiting for. That moment where the world sees her, applauds her. But let me ask you something. What if your value doesn't increase when others notice it? What if it was already full, simply waiting for you to realize it? If you've ever reached a point in your life where applause comes too late, where the people who once ignored you now want access again, tell me, would you let them in? Or would you keep walking with your head high like Lorraine? Let me know in the comments. Because I think many of us are finally realizing being seen by strangers is often kinder than being forgotten by family. I left the article taped to my refrigerator door, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that even when you bloom in silence, someone, somewhere, notices the beauty. It started with a knock on the door. I was in the middle of folding laundry, fresh towels still warm from the dryer when I heard it. 2 soft raps, hesitant. I opened the door, and there he was, Brandon, my son. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in posture, in presence. He held a pie in his hands, store-bought, apple. I wasn't sure if you were home, he said, like it was possible I wouldn't be. I'm always home, I replied gently and opened the door wider, just enough. We sat at the kitchen table, same table where I'd once pored over college forms for him, same one where Chloe spilled juice and cried when her science fair volcano didn't erupt. Funny how furniture remembers more than people do. He didn't touch the tea I'd made. I saw the article, he finally said, and the scholarship. I didn't know. You'd done all that. I nodded. You weren't supposed to. There was silence. I think we missed it, he said. Missed you. I didn't respond right away, because I'd learned in this season of life that not all silences need to be filled. He placed the pie on the counter and stood. Well, if you ever want to talk, we're around. Chloe, too. I'm sure she is, I said. Now. He flinched a little, but I wasn't being cruel, just truthful. Thanks for stopping by, I added as I walked him to the door. He paused before leaving. Do you still keep that family photo on the mantle? I looked at him. The photo he meant. Us at Chloe's 5th birthday. Me, Brandon, Erica, Chloe in her unicorn costume. No, I said softly. I've made room for new ones. A week later, Erica emailed me, a formal little note. Hi, Lorraine. We're organizing a dinner next weekend. Would love for you to come. Chloe misses you. We all do. Let us know. No mention of Christmas. Or the things that had been said. No apology. Just invitation. I stared at the screen for a long moment, and then I closed the laptop. It's not that I didn't want reconciliation, but I had learned something hard and holy in the last few months. An open door means nothing if it's only opened when someone realizes you're valuable again. At church that Sunday, someone approached me, an older gentleman, widowed like me. He had seen the news clip. You carry yourself with peace, he said. I smiled. It's earned, I replied. Back home, I baked banana bread and wrote Maribel, the scholarship recipient, a letter. I told her I believed in her, that she reminded me of a girl I used to be, and that no matter what happened, graduation or not, she had already made someone proud. I sealed it. No return address. Just a note at the bottom. Bloom. Loud or quiet, it still counts. 2 days later, Chloe texted, Grandma, do you want to come with me to look at apartments? I really love your opinion. I stared at it for a while. The old me would have said yes instantly. Dropped everything. Baked cookies, showed up with measuring tape. But now, I breathed first, then replied, I'm glad you're thinking of me, but I've made other plans that day. Maybe another time. It wasn't revenge. It was balance. People think the turning point in a story is loud, obvious, dramatic, but sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just the moment you stop needing to be wanted and realize that's what makes them come looking. Spring came late that year. The daffodils bloomed timidly, unsure if the frost had truly passed. Much like the people in my life, Brandon had started texting once a week, mostly short things. "Hey, just checking in. Let us know if you need anything." Need? Funny word, isn't it? For so long, I'd needed everything. Acknowledgement, space, warmth, a seat at my own table. Now I didn't. And that's what unsettled them most. One Saturday morning, I ran into Erica at the farmer's market. She was holding a reusable tote filled with greens and artisan bread. She looked surprised, maybe even nervous. "Lorraine," she said, too brightly, "I didn't know you still came here." "I've never stopped," I replied, bagging tomatoes. She laughed awkwardly. "It's been a while." I nodded. "For some things, yes." She glanced down. "Chloe's planning a graduation brunch. She'd really like you there." "Would she?" I asked. "Or would she like the photos to look full?" Erica didn't answer. I went. To the brunch. Not for them, but for myself. I wore my best blouse, the one Walter always said brought out my eyes. Brought a small bouquet of sunflowers, Chloe's favorite when she was 7. The room was filled with pastel balloons and people I didn't recognize. Chloe saw me and smiled, thin, polite, the kind you give a distant relative. She hugged me briefly. "Glad you made it." I wanted to say, "Do you remember the birthday I stayed up all night sewing your unicorn costume?" But I didn't. Instead, I smiled and found a quiet seat by the window. I watched her pose for photos, watched Erica direct the caterers like she was starring in a production, watched Brandon scroll on his phone. They looked happy, but the kind of happy that floats on the surface, like soda, sparkling, loud, and quick to go flat. After dessert, someone tapped my shoulder, a professor. "You must be Lorraine Whitmore," she said. "Chloe mentioned the scholarship, incredible work." I blinked. She mentioned it? She said her grandmother had started something beautiful for students who needed a second chance. My throat tightened. Not my grandmother started something for me, not even my grandmother's fund. Just a story, a footnote. I left early, slipped out while they were cutting cake. No one noticed. At home, I changed into soft clothes and sat on the porch with a cup of tea. And for the first time in months, I let myself feel the ache, not of rejection, but of irrelevance. It's a strange kind of grief, being remembered for something, but not as someone. A week later, I got a letter from Maribel, handwritten, 3 pages, tear-stained. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, you don't know me beyond a form, but I wanted to tell you what your scholarship did. My mother cried when I told her. My little brother made me a card. I'm the first in our family to go beyond high school. But more than that, it made me feel like someone, somewhere believed in my future enough to put their name behind it. I promise to carry your name into rooms you've never stepped in. I won't waste it." I folded the letter and held it close to my chest. That night, I slept easier than I had in weeks. The distance wasn't a wall, it was a path. I had walked farther than they ever expected me to, and while they tried to wave me back, I was already too far to hear clearly. I didn't hate them. I just no longer lived in their orbit. Sometimes people notice they've lost you too late, and when they do, they try to speed up, to catch up to where you are. But growth doesn't work like that. You can't rush what someone else earned through quiet, private pain. The next time Brandon called, I let it go to voicemail. Not out of cruelty, just because I was in the garden, replanting lavender, choosing where I wanted beauty to return next. Dawn light filtered through the lace curtains as I stepped into the garden. The roses I pruned weeks ago were finally unfurling, soft pink buds begging to open. I knelt beside them, pressing my palms into the cool soil, and felt a gentle stirring in my chest. Something old, something deep, something that had waited for its moment. Across the yard, the lavender I replanted last winter trembled in the breeze. I'd nearly given up on it after the long freeze, but new shoots had emerged anyway. They were fragile, but alive. I pinched a stem, inhaled its clean scent, and silently thanked the earth for its stubbornness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I unfolded the screen to read an email from the Scholarship Foundation. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, We're thrilled to let you know that Aaliyah Ramirez has just been accepted into her second year at State University with top marks. She's majoring in engineering. She wrote, "Your faith in me has been the difference between me giving up and me giving it my all. I promise to make the Quiet Roots Scholarship proud. Congratulations, and thank you for turning silence into opportunity." Tears pricked at my eyes, not tears of sorrow, but of something warmer, of pride I no longer needed permission to feel. Back in the kitchen, I warmed 2 cups of chamomile tea. I carried them outside on a weathered tray, one for me, one for the empty bench where Walter and I used to sit. I poured the tea and placed the second cup beside me, imagining him here, the steam curled between us like a whisper. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd started 3 chapters ago, with the question, who am I without them? Underneath, the pages had filled with stories, memories of sewing Halloween costumes, midnight pancake breakfasts, library read-alouds. I flipped to the last blank page and wrote, "The woman who planted roots in silent soil, the woman who finally bloomed on her own terms." Then I closed the notebook with a quiet, contented sigh. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the community library, my second home. The children's librarian, Nora, greeted me with her usual bright smile. "Lorraine, we've missed you," she said, handing me a stack of new picture books. "I've missed this," I told her, and we shelved books together in companionable silence. A little boy tugged at my sleeve and asked me to read Green Eggs and Ham. I sat on the rug and read aloud in my best Sam I Am voice, and the children laughed. Their laughter sounded like hope. That evening, I lit a handful of beeswax candles and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and typed the final lines of my memoir. In the end, I learned that roots don't shout. They hold, and when you water your own roots, silently, patiently, they remind the world that you've always been the foundation. I added a dedication. "For every woman whose love was invisible, may you one day see the strength it sowed." Then I clicked send to my editor. A week later, the library hosted a small reception for the book launch. The room smelled of fresh coffee and honey almond glaze. Friends from book club, neighbors, even a few strangers who'd read the article showed up. They'd brought homemade snacks, flowers, and most touching, a scrapbook of Polaroids. Children I'd read to, students I'd mentored, roses I'd transplanted in the community garden. I stood at the podium, a simple wooden lectern borrowed from the church. My heart thumped, but in that familiar way that says you're exactly where you belong. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't just my story, it's ours. Because every time someone plants a seed of kindness, whether they say it out loud or not, it changes the world." A ripple of applause followed. Not for me, I thought, but for what we had built together. That night, I lay in bed and remembered the woman I was 1 year ago, an unseen anchor in a family that forgot she existed. And I realized I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't a shadow. I wasn't a placeholder. I was the keeper of roots, and I had learned to flourish in my own light. Has there ever been a time in your life when you gave your all, quietly, without asking for recognition, only to be overlooked, dismissed, or forgotten? Maybe you were the one who stayed up late making sure everything was perfect, and no one said thank you. Or perhaps you supported someone through their darkest hour, and when they found the light, they left you in the shadows. But somewhere down the line, did something bloom? Did that quiet love, your patience, your strength, your sacrifice, finally reveal its impact? If so, I'd love to hear it. Tell us, what silent seed did you plant that later grew into something beautiful? Your story might be the exact reminder someone needs today, that even unnoticed roots can grow strong and bloom in ways no one saw coming. Share it below. Someone's heart is waiting.